So I'm going to talk about the cost of supporting a long distance relationship and or marriage. I put a lot of thought into it, and I want to help or even save brothers, if they decide to get into a situation where they're going to support a significant other. So I myself, make pretty good money, but still that does not mean that it does not come with challenges. I've noticed traveling to different countries that different countries has its own set of financial, costs, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation, whether it's just things that generally make a woman happy. Every country and women in those countries, they have different wants and needs. So I want to get into that. Now, what it costs to support a long distance relationship, it the few variables are the particular country, how much you make, and the type of woman that you meet. Those are the main variables when it comes to supporting a woman in a long distance relationship. Now, in my opinion, I'm just going to preface what I'm going to be speaking about is, in my opinion, you shouldn't be fully supporting a girlfriend. You know, if you want to take on that provider role, you should be fully supporting a wife. Your girlfriend should be earning the title of wife, whether she's earning it through patience, she's earning it through not receiving things from you. Because how I did things in my situation, I said, as a girlfriend, I could help you out from time to time, but I am not financially responsible for you. I am not financially responsible for you. And a lot of women, salute is J. Clyde, and a lot of women, you know, primarily in Latin America, because that's where most of my experience has been, a lot of women, they want to be fully supported as a girlfriend. In my situation, it was just a very few that was okay with not being fully supported as a girlfriend. But I made it clear to anybody that I was with that I am not fully supporting a girlfriend. I'm only fully supporting if you make it to being my wife, because I'm not financially responsible for you. So that's just kind of how I approach situations like that. But some guys are not interested in marriage, so the girlfriend might be the highest thing that they may want to do with a female. So I get it. If that's what you want to cut things off at the girlfriend level, then maybe you have to, feel like you need to fully support. So what I'm going to say applies to all scenarios. Now, some countries are hyper inflated that I've noticed. Colombia, especially in the major cities like Cartagena, Medellin, DR has definitely got experienced a lot of inflation. And so those countries in particular in Latin America, I'll throw in South Africa too on my last visit to South Africa. So from 2 years to 5 years to maybe 10 years, a lot of us have seen things get more and more expensive. And as we know, with inflation, a lot of times the inflation rate doesn't rise at the same rate of our wages, so to speak. So let's get into specifics. Now, I'm going to do basically two scenarios. Basically, someone making, let's say, $100,000 a year versus somebody making $50,000 a year. And wherever you fit in that, you could kind of you could kind of gauge based on what I'm going to say. But I'm going to look at $100,000 a year versus $50,000 a year. Now, $100,000 a year salary. Now let's think about this. We know statistically there's a certain percentage of people in the United States that make over 100K. Now, I've been on a lot of panels, and anytime the discussion or somebody volunteers and say how much you make, a lot of times people throw out I make six figures, So, and we know everybody don't make six figures because the statistic data is out there. So we know, about, I'm going to say between 10 to 15% of Americans, and it may be different based on race and gender, but let's just say 10 to 15% of Americans make at least six figures or more. We're just gonna go with that. So if we extrapolate through the travelers, we can just say the passport bros. We could just kind of make a guesstimate to say 10 to 15% of passport bros make over 100,000 for argument's sake. Now, I am someone that grosses over six figures, but for simplicity, I'm just going to use 100K. Now, I was thinking about it because I'm like, okay, how come I could make six figures and still not feel comfortably able to support a wife? And when I say comfortable, I mean like you, meaning that I could spend without, meaning like spending money without monitoring your account. Like I really have to. I mean, you should be very judicious anyway when it comes to spending, but when you decide to take someone on as a financial responsibility, whether it's a woman or a child, you have to start being a little bit more aware of your finances and things of that nature. So I'm like, damn, I make over six figures. It's you can feel the pressure a little bit. You can feel the pressure a little bit. Shout out to Buck Travel. I'll read the comments in a minute. You can feel it. So I have to ask myself, I'm like, okay, what am I spending my money on in the US? Because initially I was thinking like, okay, if you make 100,000, hypothetically in the US, you should be able to live off, let's say 50,000, right? And then let's say you got another 50,000 to play with, right? That's kind of like the knowledge without getting into like details. Which you probably can. You could make six figures and live a certain type of lifestyle where you got at least half your money residual. So I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take that from you, but it just doesn't seem to be, I would say, at least my reality. So I'm looking at my expenses. Got a mortgage, so people got a rent. Rent is more expensive than a lot of mortgages now. So if I was paying rent, I would probably be spending more money. You got utilities. Depending on if you live in a hot, a warm climate or a cold climate, you're paying a lot in gas or utilities. If you have a car, you might have a car note. You got insurance. You got to eat. You got to put gas in your car. Someplace you got to have tolls. You might have credit card bills, maybe student loan bills, miscellaneous expenses. Haircuts are getting more expensive. Going shopping, maybe a gym membership. And, it's just so many things. And then also your travel budget. And when I look at my travel expenses, I spend, my travel budget is very, 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 very big. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to say what it is, but my travel budget, what I spend on travel is a lot. I spend a lot. So just to be general, if you make it, a person making 100K might fall in these two categories. They're spending 70 to 80,000 is going towards the US expenses, meaning that all the expenses that I mentioned plus travel. So let's say if you're making $100,000 a year, whether you realize it or not. Oh, and let me forget taxes too. So you got taxes too. So if you're making $100,000 a year and you travel, whatever your travel budget is, you're probably spending $70,000 a year on travel and expenses related to the U.S. I'll say 70 to 80. So that means if your expenses are 70 to 80,000, then that means you have 30 to 20,000 a year to support a foreign wife or long distance relationship with a girlfriend. 30,000 to 20,000. So we're just gonna use the low end. So we're gonna use the 80-20. We're gonna use the 80-20 scenario. So let's just say you have if you make 100,000, you have 20,000 a year to fully support a long distance situation. Now, I did the numbers for Colombia because that's what I'm most familiar with, and and I can speak for DR too to a certain extent. Now, in $100,000 situation, if you make $100,000 a year, you have 20,000. You have 20,000 left to support a woman. Using Colombia as an example, and this varies on a woman, but using Colombia for example, it's about $800 per month to support a woman. That's if you're paying for, let's say, an, a place to stay, and then money for money for her to be just as comfortable as you are in the U.S. She's able to do things without help, without asking you for additional funds. So that's basically about $400 a month, more or less. And I've asked other guys that are married to women in different countries that are long distance. When I'm speaking on long distance, that are long distance, on what they typically would spend to support a relationship. And I've kind of got around between 7 and 800 based on the particular countries, which I'm not gonna mention those other countries specifically, but these are countries that passport bros frequent. So shout out to Rona Travelers. So $100,000 a year, you have 20,000 to fully support, and I said about $800 a month if it's Colombia. DR is a little bit more expensive. I'm just gonna try to guesstimate out. Let's just say DR is more between 1,000 and 1,500 a month. So per year, if it's a Colombiana, it's about $9,600 a year if it's $800 a month. So if you make $100,000 a year and you have 20,000, left to support a woman, you can afford to support a woman on $10,000 a year. And so now out that 20,000, you have 10,000 left that you can actually save money and do whatever. But that only, but this scenario works if nothing, let's say no emergency situations come up or something sets you back. So basically in an ideal situation, a person that makes $100,000 a year could afford to support a wife in maybe, like, say, Colombia, DR, Brazil. I would say pretty much most of Latin America for the most part. I was the most expensive place in Latin America. I'm not exactly certain, but Chile might be up there. If any other countries people could mention, let me know. That could be more expensive than maybe, let's say, Dominican Republic when it comes to housing and the material, the material things women want and things of that nature. The maintenance. I'm gonna say the maintenance. So if you make $100,000 a year, and you have $20,000 a year to support a woman, you could $20,000 a year can support most women in countries in Latin America. I could confidently say that. So the problem is, I'll drop the link and bring you up. Damn, I dropped the link and bring you up. Let me put this in the chat real quick. Let me put this in the chat real quick. All right, cool. So I went down 100K salary. Now I'm going to talk about the 50K salary, which is half of 100K. He said Asia as well. Yeah, Asia as well. So if you make $50,000 a year in the US, here's when I did the numbers, here's where it gets kind of tough. So I basically just split the money in half. So in an 80-20, so in an 80-20% situation, meaning 80% of expenses in the US and 20% left to support a wife. If you're making $50,000 a year, that means you're spending $40,000 a year for travel and US expenses. I see you in the background, Tony. I'm gonna bring you up in a minute. And then you got $10,000 left to support a woman. Now, when I was thinking about that, I'm like, okay, 50K salary. What woman, what woman can you support off $10,000 a year? Now, I brought up the expenses for, let's say, Colombia, which came to about $10,000 a year. Now you can do that, but in that situation, you can't save money because now you paid all your bills, you covered all your travel, you're supporting her, but if an emergency happens, it's gonna set you back. You're gonna either have to send her less money or downsize somewhere. So what I'm saying is, if you make $50,000 a year, it is very, very tight, especially especially in the countries we frequent. Now, in the cheaper countries, yes. And I'm kind of, I want to get into that as well. So if you make $50,000 a year living in the US and you only have 10,000 to support a wife, to comfortably do that, you would need to find a woman that you can support $5,000 a year, which would be roughly about $400 a month. And if and renting housing would probably have to be more like $200 a month, more or less. I don't know too many countries that are as cheap. Um, Besides some countries in Africa and maybe some countries in Asia, but Latin America, not too much. But then when you talk about your travel budget, you can't even, if you make $50,000 a year, you probably can't even see her maybe once or maybe twice a year out that. So you're not even getting the full benefits of that relationship because you don't live there, one, and then you're not traveling there frequently. So if you make $50,000 a year, um from a financial aspect, you should not be supporting a woman long distance. Let me bring Tony up while I'm talking. Let me bring Tony up while I'm talking. But you'll come out. I mean, obviously, you come out cheaper if you live in the country with her. However, and I'm just generalizing. You come out cheaper if you live there, but you make less money. And what I mean by that is, living in the U.S., I make over $100,000. Right now, if I was to live in another country, working remote, I could work remote, but I would make less money remote if I was a person that was able to receive VA benefits. And I'm not talking about on the high end, I'm talking about on the middle ground. You know, they're not going to be VA benefits are not going to be six figures a year. most pensions are not going to be six figures a year. And even if you got rental income, you might not be making six figures a year. So my point is that on average, even if you live in that country, the type of income that I see people making, they're not making six figures in another country, being, living there. So you come out cheaper, but you make less money. Now, if you got, I brought up the example of $50,000 a year living in the US. Now, if you made, let's say, $10,000 a year, or if you had $10,000 a year, but living in that country, you can probably make it. So what's the difference? So what am I saying? And I'm gonna have Tony chime in. So what am I saying? So based on a $50,000 person living in the US, you'll make 50,000, 40K will go to expenses, 10K could go to fully support a woman. You take that away, you take that $50,000 salary away and go move to that country, and let's say you're able to produce $10,000 a year on your own. That means that you're no longer making 50,000. You're making only 10 to 15, let's say 10 to $15,000 a year in a particular country. You can theoretically support a wife off maybe 10 to $15,000 a year, um, if you live there and bringing that money in. So um, I'm gonna let Traveling Tony chime in, see what he got. What's good, bro?
What's good, bro? I was just checking in on you, seeing what you was doing. How you
Okay,
doing,
okay,
man? Yeah, I just I dropped the video today, so whenever I drop videos, I'll be checking the YouTube thing. But
okay.
so what are you talking? What's the premises of this live? I
So
came
I'm
late.
going. I'm going over like what it costs to fully support a long distance relationship if you live in the US, and then versus if you live in that country. So I basically went over two scenarios: someone making $100,000 a year in the US versus $50,000 a year in the US. And basically what I've came up with is that if you're making $100,000 a year, the majority of money you're spending the majority of your money in the US for expenses, and let's say travel to see your significant other, and you have about $20,000 left over to support a woman. And so basically, what what type of woman or what countries could you support a woman if you only have $20,000 a year, to support her with? Or if you're making $50,000 a year, you would probably have only about $10,000 a year to support a woman. So I'm looking at those two. I'm looking at those two factors. Since you are in what I consider a very affordable country, you know, if somebody moved to Tanzania, and let's just say they just really wasn't making making a lot of money, but let's just say they was able to make $15,000 a year, which is about, how much is that a month? Let me do the math real quick. I'm gonna go lower. I'm gonna go. No, I'm gonna just say this. I'm gonna say $12,000 a year just to be simple. $1,000 a month. Could a man make a woman? Will a woman be happy in Tanzania if a man made $1,000 a month and she felt like she was being fully taken care of?
I would say yes. Um, there's lots of people. Surprisingly, there are a lot of Americans that make in that range that are nomads. It's actually pretty crazy. Some people come out with barely nothing. They don't even come with jobs. They'll come with like 5,000, not just to Tanzania, but around the world. I'm sure you've heard about that. It's crazy to me that people do it so often. And they do like odd jobs. Like they'll try to get a car and they'll try to like give rides and stuff like that. And that actually is why sometimes nomadic communities overseas can be toxic, because nomads that are scrounging to make money would try to finesse other Americans. You get what I'm saying?
Interesting. We're gonna drill on this for a minute. Shout out to first time me seeing Peachy Keen. She said, as a woman, I completely agree with this. If she's not your wife, you shouldn't be 100% supporting any woman anywhere. Facts. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Definitely hit the like button. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed. And Rona
Or you
Travel
know
said
what's
Asian as well. But go ahead.
You know what's crazy? What she was saying, like, if she's not your wife, you shouldn't be supporting any woman anywhere. This is the difference between us and them, right? For example, Tanzanian guys. Let's say me, for example. I have my wife. So
Mhm.
now a lot of Tanzanian guys, this is how I guess the polygamy thing will be done, right? It's under the table. Now, so I support my wife 100%. Now, her quality of life is going to be a lot higher, but obviously some guys they get another girl and they would support her life 100%. So I guess it's the equivalent of what you're talking about. But the girl's lifestyle may be a total of, like you're saying, $300 a month. She doesn't get the same level of treatment as the wife, but she still lives well. And some guys do this with three, four girls. You know what I'm saying? So they're supporting like three, four girls' lifestyles completely.
Right. Now that's I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. And just to reiterate what he was saying is that a lot of guys, I mean a lot of men they do support side chicks to a certain extent. Now, a lot of times they can afford it, right? So like for let's say in my case for example, I could spread my excess money to more than one woman. So yeah, that's doable. But I started the stream saying that I don't bel I don't believe a man should fully support a girlfriend. Now, if you got a wife or if you got side chicks, that's a different conversation. You know what I mean? You're paying them to accept your situation. You know what I mean? That that that's
Facts,
a
facts.
that's a totally different scenario. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Now, talk about again. You said you know what I mean, there are digital, well, I don't want to say digital nomads, but nomads that are living off of, let's say, $1,000 a month.
So when I met Mark Meets Africa, he pretty much informed me there are people living off of like a couple $100 a month living as nomads just in Tanzania. But it's not just Tanzania, there's other countries that people are doing this as well. And you hear about like people going homeless in Thailand and stuff like that. People are just trying to escape the matrix, but they're going unprepared.
Hmm.
That's the issue. So I think it's going to be more common to see people losing all their money trying to be overseas, because it just sucks that bad for some people, right? Like they just, I need to get out of here right away by any means, and they leave with $10,000. And 10,000, they're unaware of how far 10,000 actually gets you. Some people assume 10,000 might last you a couple years in Africa.
What the?
Depends on your. Some people think that it depends on your quality of life, though. You know what I'm saying? If you want to live like a poor African, yes, you can, but it will suck. You're gonna be eating ugali, small fish and potatoes. You know what I mean? It's not gonna be a luxurious lifestyle. You're not gonna have air conditioner. Like if you don't have air conditioner, you save so much money, right? For
Right.
example, myself right now, these are the hot months. So right
Mhm.
now I'm spending about 600K TSH for my electric to run like two ACs at a time. One for my wife in the room, one for me in my living room when I'm playing my game.
Mhm.
Now, most Tanzanians already don't. I would say like 90 something percent of Tanzanians don't have air conditioning,
Mhm.
because when you run these air conditioners, this shit it's about $240 because it's the hot month though. When
Mhm.
it's cooler, it'll be about maybe $80 a month. Electricity is expensive in these countries.
Wow. So, what would you? I mean, you believe more in being in that country. So, what's the trade off for? Let's just say a man make $50,000 a year, right, in the U.S. He's able to travel to. I'm going to use Latin America because Africa would be too far and expensive. So let's just say he goes to Latin America. mm, 3 times a year. Four. We kind of pushing it, but let's say 3 times a year. So he makes $50,000 a year. He travels Latin America 3 or 4 times a year to see his girlfriend, and he only has $10,000 to like take care of her, so to speak. Now, if he decided to say, fuck everything, I'm just gonna move to Latin America, and he figured out a way to make $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year. Could that situation be, I would say, better for him making $12,000 a year living in Latin America and having his woman and being able to take care of all the bills?
Oh, that's a hard one. See, because I'm biased, Latin America, it's kind of materialistic. So I think if you're a foreigner, especially, the girl's gonna want more out of you than the local. There are local guys in Latin America making, $1,000 a month, especially if these guys are going for the hot chicks. Because the trade off would be the language barrier, right? That would be the problem, the big language barrier. Unless if you speak does he speak the language fluently? And is what's his 50,000 a year? Was that before or after taxes? Because 50,000 after taxes is okay.
Before tax.
Okay, if you're 50,000 after taxes, you're chilling. But before that, yeah, yeah, that would have been that's
Or,
crazy.
I mean, I use Latin America because it's closer. But let's just say it was Tanzania.
$1,000 a month on Tanzania, you'll be straight. You'll be straight. I mean, you wouldn't be shopping at like the places and stuff where me and you go, but you'll be living a moderate local life. So some of the things you won't have air conditioner. You know what I'm saying? You'll be using the fan
Mhm.
pretty much, but you won't be eating grocery chicken, packaged chicken. You'll be having local chicken from like the mart and stuff like that. So it'll be tougher chicken. It'll be a different life. Your quality of life will go down drastically for a
But
thousand dollars.
you will have a woman that you're attracted to that is compliant, submissive, and you'll have all the benefits of being in a relationship with a foreign woman or
Yes.
traditional woman.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would have all the, and she will be happy. They're not really materialistic like that, so she'll be happy. Because let's say if you're making 1,000 a month, what your apartment or whatever you rent, it's gonna be what about 200 a month. Most people are gonna want 200 a month is gonna be it'll be all right. It won't be too bad. 200 a month won't be too bad depending on your area. You got your lady, you have all your necessities. The thing that's gonna hit you is internet. I pay like $85 a month for internet. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
You gotta
Interesting.
cancel. You gotta cancel your phone service in America. My T-Mobile bill, they're hitting me. You know what I'm saying? And you got your low. You'll have to reduce some things. Like you would actually have to budget. Really, really itemize a budget if you're living on $1,000 to be successful, to still save a little money, because you got
Mm.
to think about like what if you need to go to the hospital. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? How you got to pay out of pocket. It's not free healthcare like America. I mean, you could go to the government hospital, but I wouldn't want to go to the government hospital. I would I would want to go to the private hospital.
So,
That's
fellas
just
in
me.
the chat, what would you drop everything in the US and live in a foreign country if you was able to make $1,000 a month doing whatever? Would do you think you would be overall happier in that situation? I want to get some opinions on that. I want to get some opinions on that. The question is, $1,000 a month in another country, would you take that or pursue that and leave everything you have in the US instead of doing a long distance relationship in the US, just live there? I think it's a good question. I mean, obviously there's people that have done it or doing it right now. Um I see white guys all the time vlogging about, going through their savings and dropping everything. And then when you get broke, you just go back to the US and re up. That's how some people look at it. I just go back to the US and grind for a couple years or two and come back. You know. So my mind just not set up to think like that. You know what I mean? I want to maintain my standard of living in the US in another country, but at a fraction of the cost. you know, that's kind of how that's just kind of how my mind works. But I see what the numbers is doable in a lot of countries, but what I wanted to kind of get to a lot of passport bros is that a lot of these countries are being more expensive. So, like I mentioned, Colombia, for example, about $10,000 a year to support a woman. It was cheaper before the pandemic, and even cheaper before that. DR too, and so, and I'm just speaking on personal experience. You will have there will be friction in the relationship wo- once the cost of living goes up in these countries, and they're going up because of whether guys traveling there or Western influence. So places like DR, for example, for me making six figures, to me DR, to me supporting a woman in DR would be too expensive for me. Even though I could afford it, I just wouldn't want to spend the money to for a Dominican woman if I'm in a long distance relationship. Even if I'm living there. Because we talking about we talking about $700 rents in a decent spot. You're talking about traveling with her and her wanting certain material things, whatever. Like DR, for the type of woman that I would want, it would cost a decent amount of money. So I want guys to think about this because Colombia caught up on me. It got more expensive. Money got tighter because if you go into a marriage, marriage is supposed to be forever, right? And so you get into a committed situation, and the exchange rate, the cost of living is a certain number, but sometimes you may not realize like shit what is going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and let's say you're making the same amount of money and cost of living is going up. Most women, most divorces, the reason for divorce is financial. It's one, financial, two is adultery, and three is irreconcilable differences. So finances is very important when it comes to these women. You can have a setback, you can lose your job. Some women are empathetic for a few months. Then when they start seeing like things getting cut back, it just women just not built to a lot of women just not, even if they came from nothing, once they obtain a level of status, like they don't want to go back. So I want guys to really, really, when you think about these countries, if they're borderline expensive, 5 years from now, it might be out of your your pay scale. So I mean, there are countries that are, specifically in Africa, in Asia, and I think the movement is trending towards Africa and Asia because the cost are the cost of living is just less expensive, and the cost to support a woman. Let's just keep it a being, like, we guys support women in all ways, whether you are marriage, whether you tricking, you're spending money. You're spending money to have interactions with a woman when you're traveling. I don't care what guys be saying about that. A woman is always in the mix. So, Africa and Asia are being talked about more and more because of the cost. And like I said, a few times, Thailand has been probably the um, the cheapest country I've been to as a vacation. I don't know what it is now, but um, Thailand. Let me catch up on some of these comments real quick. Christopher Wary said not to make. Okay, yeah, he said he wouldn't leave the U.S. to make $12,000 a year only. Mr. Dawkins, what up, bro? He said I wouldn't. He said not on 100K. Now I feel you. I don't think I don't think I could do it either. He said need somewhere I could live in an upper middle class lifestyle or better to permanently leave the US. Yeah. There's ways you can do that, which is, you can, I've talked about this a lot of times. You can buy a condo or buy land in certain countries, but you could basically buy your home while you're working in the US, and by the time you're ready to leave, it's already paid for, because rent and housing are your biggest expense overseas. So if you got that out the way, that's half the battle. So unfortunately, yeah, condos is probably the thing that you can buy in any country. Most countries, you know, it's hard to buy land and own it outright, depending on the continent and countries. But yeah, you can prepare for that as well. I know Traveling Tony. I know he's make sure y'all check out his channel too. He's working on building his home in Tanzania. For him and his wife. So um, definitely make sure you guys monitor that journey as well. But yeah, man, that's what I was gonna ask you too. You brought up a point too. I wanted to mention, if you're making $12,000 a year in let's say in Tanzania, there are going to be local men making more money than you, right?
Definitely, it's gonna be a good amount. There are people that make Colombia. A lot of those dudes make good money, especially in the tourist area. They're making about 1,100, $1,200 a month. Brazil, the police officers, they're making like almost 2 bands a month.
So, so that's another dynamic. So you drop everything in the U.S. You're still an American, but you go to a country and say, "All right, I'm gonna survive off $12,000 a month." Now you don't put yourself. Well, to be honest with you, whether you're living whether you're living off $12,000 a month in that country or living in the US and you're sending her $12,000 a year, is still the same as it pertains to a local guy, because she's feeling, because basically it's what she's experiencing. So if you're living in the US and she's getting, let's say, $12,000 a year, then if a local guy makes more than $12,000 a year, technically you're not really technically the money you're sending her, you're not competing with the local men. And I realized this in my situation, because me making six figures, she doesn't me being in a long distance relationship, me making six figures, I'm feeling the benefit. I'm feeling the benefits of making six figures, but she doesn't feel it. She's only feeling the $10,000 a year. I'm just throwing a number out there, but she's only feeling the $10,000 a year that she's received. She doesn't feel the six figures. So from a woman's perspective, she like, okay, I'm getting $10,000 a year from my man, and there are other, let's say, Brazilians or Colombian men making 20, $30,000 a year. So you're not really over competing with those men because they're not feeling it. They're only feeling a $10,000 a year lifestyle. They're not feeling a they're not even feeling a local lifestyle, you know, because I have these conversations. It's like, let's say she would compare what other women get from other local guys that, obviously they live there, the local guys, compared to a man that you're splitting your resources between the US and another country. So you can say I make more money than the average Brazilian man, or I'm a top 1% in Colombia or whatever. You might be the top 1% based on your gross income, but what she actually experiences is a fraction of that because you're splitting your resources between two countries. So she's really experiencing a fraction of that. So those are dynamics that I think about, I realized, and it's it's not for everybody, being a provider. And this is why even guys that hate on passport bros and detractors, they always say, a lot of these guys, they're not marrying these women because they can't afford it. Whether that's the reason, I can't say, but the reality is that you know most passport bros can't afford it. And that's not a knock against the movement or anything like that. That's just the reality. So as I talk more and more about what's going on, what I see in the travel community, you know, and a lot of people want to say like, why aren't guys getting married, or they want to see people pushing the movement into these long-term relationships. The reality is it's not that's not the direction that the movement is going to. It can't go in that direction. Even if we wanted to, it's too expensive to be in a relationship or marriage. And the movement is going to basically be about casual dating. That that's another conversation, but it's basically it's casual dating or pay for play.
I
Either of
agree.
those two. So
I
close us
definitely agree.
out. Close us out, Tony, man.
No, okay, yeah, bro. You're right, man. Most dudes can't afford it. I mean, the only other option would be to bring him back. The USA meets Kenya. He's bringing his fiance back to the states. You can do that, but that's on you. I would suggest if you're gonna do that, at least live with the woman for a while, see how it goes and stuff like that. And you're taking the risk of westernization. But yeah, I think it's gonna be just about casual dating, man. I think that's mainly what's gonna be about. I think people are gonna get tired of South America when they realize the girls, not all, but most of those girls don't really like the dudes they're dealing with. They're just taking the money. It's gonna be too mechanical after a while, and people are gonna start shifting to Africa and Asia because the girls actually, you get the feeling like they like you.